Hello, 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 and welcome to In The Spotlight, the show that brings you unknown underground music and puts it in the spotlight. My name is Ryan Scibetta, and our editor and engineer is Quill. Thanks so much for joining us at 91.9 KCSB-FM in Santa Barbara, online at kcsb.org. We have a very, very wonderful guest for this week. Probably the least underground music you heard, although their quality certainly fits in with the best of indie rock. We have Bora Karaca and Ross Federman from Tally Hall and Miracle Musical. Thanks so much for joining us.
Oh, thanks so much for having us.
Of course.
Wait, you said least underground? I'll take it.
Yeah, I was gonna really? Yeah, really. That's not. I didn't.
That sounds good.
You really, I see you guys as like huge hits.
Oh, kind words. Just.
Yeah, really. News to us.
Yeah, news flash.
I mean, on the internet scene at least, there's those ruler of everything memes that are going everywhere.
Oh, yeah.
When I play Tally Hall to my friends, they're like, play more of that.
Oh, just kind people all over the place.
Yeah. You guys have more, I mean, over 1 million listeners on Spotify. That's really successful.
Yeah, it's funny. I have noticed like the Spotify listenership crawl up. It's just so hard to ever get any sense of like frame of reference on how significant or meaningful those numbers really are. If you ever try to Google like, just any kind of analytics on what the thread is, of listenership, it's not easy you can find it for wealth distribution really easily. Everybody publishes that as much as they can, right? Spotify listenership, it's harder to really know where you stand.
Yeah.
The rule of thumb we have at this station is that above 500,000 for Spotify, 200,000 for YouTube, or 100,000 for SoundCloud. I might have the YouTube and SoundCloud numbers mixed, but that counts as mainstream. So yeah, so you made it.
The magic number. What a relief.
We usually try to play stuff lower than that unless the music is really, really good and you guys qualify.
Oh. Wow, so we were actually close to disqualifying? Okay.
You are mainstream, gentlemen.
Yeah, we're some kind of stream of some kind.
People know who you are. That is very unusual for the interviews I do on this station.
Well, that's very kind.
You deserve it. I don't want to fanboy out. I got to maintain my professionalism, but the music that you've made has been some of the most impactful that I've heard in my entire life. So I'm just really grateful to have this opportunity to talk about these songs, and I'm really grateful that I can show it and publish it to everybody who might be listening, either on the FM channels or online, because I hope this music has, and I think it will have, such a good impact on you too, the listener.
Well, very kind words. Very kind.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just happy people are coming across it and hearing it and enjoying it, frankly,
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, because when we made and heavily promoted any of this music, it didn't seem like it was necessarily hitting as many ears as it seems to be now, and so it's just nice to know more and more people are getting something from it.
That's a good thing, I think, to start off about is the music we're going to be hearing. The songs from the album Hawaii Part 2. They were released December 12th, 2012, right?
Yes, that sounds right.
so that's
yes. All the album tracks. So there was a sort of B-side single, if you will, Paradox, that was released previously to that by about a month or so.
That's
don't really matter. Yep, 2012. That was the release year. Let's continue. Sorry.
You're all good. I thought I had all my facts in order.
Well, yeah. When was Spotify a thing? I feel like that was before it had kind of picked up. Am I wrong about that?
That's correct.
Everything's a blur for me, by the way. Let's just get that out of the way.
I think it's before Spotify really picked up. Though I do remember all sorts of hectic, crazy Spotify conversations happening at labels in 2011, 2010 and 11. It was clear oh, Spotify Spotify's coming. What's that going to mean? Let's figure out something here. But
Right.
I don't think it was until like kind of the mid 2010s even that Spotify really like kind of became the standard, became the par for the course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doing some Googling, it looks like they launched in the United States July 2011.
Yeah, I feel like they had literally been out, but not in like, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong.
And they're at that point, go ahead.
Sorry. Go ahead. I was just going to say, no, it certainly wasn't. It wasn't the formidable force that it is now when we released any of this music, or certainly when we recorded any of it.
Yeah.
You know, like I guess it's fair to say we made all of these songs, you know, where in a time where the future of music listening was still kind of up in the air. You know, I think there were people on SoundCloud and what are some of the others? There are a few other early streaming services that were big, but really like iTunes had been the most recent sort of disruptor, if you will.
Yeah.
You know, and I think there were kind of a lot more question marks up in the air in terms of like what was the music listening landscape really going to be like from here on out.
Yeah, and the songs that we heard, or the way you released Hawaii Part 2 was just sort of anonymously posting it, you know, 12 a.m., right?
Yeah. I think the hope was like, you know, that it would sort of exist in, I guess, like a newer way, like that didn't have basically physical media, which later on we did kind of a limited sort of vinyl release. But at the time, the concept was simply for it to just exist, you know, digitally, and then for it to be kind of not only like an anonymous, like sort of presence, but like, you know, obviously there were a lot of people involved, so it was like less about like a single person and more like a kind of like a community of, you know, of artists.
I mean, it's I'd say, a cast, really.
Yes, thank you. That's probably the better word.
A cast of characters and a cast, you know, made by a cast of musicians, I suppose, and singers.
Yeah.
And
I like that better.
Why do you like the word cast so much to describe this album?
Oh, the Miracle Musical.
Well, I guess also personally, because a lot of us kind of had known each other from sort of other parts of our lives, but we didn't live in the same place. You know, Joe and I certainly didn't live in the same place, and you know, Ross and
I was just going to say, you know, Bora, I don't know that you or I, and I know for a fact that nor Joe and I were in the same room ever at the same time.
No, we weren't. It was a decade before the current pandemic, mind you. Way ahead of our time in terms of making music remotely together. Yeah, I quite literally never saw like Ross in the flesh during the entire thing. We talked many, many times, but yeah, we actually never. I did personally see a lot of the artists in person because they happened to be in Los Angeles at the time. So it was kind of like a very cool, like revolving door, both digitally and, you know, in person. And I guess I'm not really good with kind of intellectualizing that concept, but I think that's why cast feels good, because in the production, it's like the final product, you wouldn't necessarily be able to tell that it was very piecemeal, but I like that about it, that we were able to communicate over great distances without necessarily being in the same room. And the feeling of the project was enough to glue everything together. Like everybody who was involved could resonate with the album and not really have to be there.
Yeah, and you know what I would say, just to bring it back full circle, I guess much of the same way. I mean, you can see great plays where there are members of the cast that you don't actually really ever see on stage at the same time.
Yes. Yes.
It's a really good analogy.
You know, that a lot of the record in many ways felt like that. You know, there were certain songs or types of songs that, you know, certain contributors and members were all over because it made sense, and others that, may have really been a much smaller subset of players on it. But you wouldn't necessarily, I don't think, know that listening through the record.
Yeah,
I think if you listen for it, for vocalists, it can become very obvious.
I think nowadays it's not this crazy idea to fly tracks in, basically. And by fly, I mean, email to a different physical location. But, at the time it seemed like,
we were far from I think, I don't know if you disagree, but Postal Service to me was the first real example of this, which was a good probably 10 years before this.
Sure, yeah. It's not a crazy idea, but now I feel like it's very normal because of our capabilities with software and the internet, and especially now during COVID. But at the time, it wasn't necessarily the way to make an album. You would get together with the people that you're recording with, and everybody was very understanding, and they were able to perform it as if they were with us, and that's why it sort of glued together so well.
Yeah, I mean, we're able to do that now with this interview. None of us three are in the same location.
Yeah, exactly. So I really enjoyed it because of how it was very easy to sort of bring all of that together, despite the fact that everybody was mostly kind of separated by either time or location.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the first song we're going to hear, Introduction to the Snow. This is, an introduction to the musical. And it references a lot of themes that we're going to hear in later songs. Was this, I have a hunch, was this the first song you made, or was it, and this is my guess, a song you made later on to sort of tie everything together at the beginning?
That is a good question. Ross might actually have the better answer, but I could be wrong. Because I'll be speaking on Joe's behalf on that, but I believe that was that came earlier than really? Most of the other. I could be wrong, but don't quote me on that. But
I thought I had the inside info with Dream Suite being the thing everything else was based on.
Well, yeah, Dream Suite was literally not complete until the other ones were. Oh. As far as just from a production standpoint, the idea was there, but it was not a complete song until basically.
So it was the first and the last song.
Yeah, in an interesting way. The actual concept, obviously, the song is very recognizable because you heard it on the first track. But I believe that the album sort of had to come together first before Dream Suite had to be kind of finished. Just in my opinion, I might just be talking for myself, but I feel like that's how it went down. Also, a lot of time has passed, so this might all just be nothing but blur. So
that's totally fine. That we get the emotion out of it.
Because I didn't. Go on.
Oh, I'm back. I just wanted to say I had to jump off the call for
sure.
A little bit there. I don't know if you guys even noticed or not, but
well, you weren't pitching in, so I tried to take the helm, which I may have given completely wrong information. But what was I going to say? Well, yeah, I didn't log very much about the whole thing. I was just working. So I didn't I personally didn't journal it very much, if at all. And we weren't really, I think videoing on phones was not quite a thing at that time necessarily. So I was just working, and I think a lot of the stuff is just a blur now to me. So I am sorry if anything
it's all good. We get to
I remember like distinct moments about like everything about like production and like, you know, taking Joe's music and turning it into, you know, a recording of some kind. I guess Ryan was asking.
What were the questions about
so intro to this, intro is basically the question. Like, and I think Ryan was saying that it may have been written after the rest of the album, which I don't.
I took a guess and I was wrong. A swing and a miss.
Well, I don't know. I mean, okay, I don't think that's true.
I don't know. I actually don't know for a fact the chronological order in which many of these songs were written. I mean, some of them I know were written a long time ago because I had heard bits and pieces of them and ideas in other forms.
So I guess you could argue that intro did actually come a little bit later than a few of the other songs, but yeah, it is kind of nebulous as far as the actual timeline, because a lot of the songs did exist in some kind of form, but
yeah, and I mean, a lot of the process was sort of starting from demos and I think, or correct, there might have been a couple tracks that were kind of more or less from scratch, but yeah, it was mostly like, taking demos and actually using the demos and sort of morphing those into final recordings. On any given track, there might be a couple of the original demo tracks still on it, including Intro to the Snow.
There might be original demo tracks on.
I don't know about that. That I might want to argue with, but I'm also afraid to do so. You're not totally wrong. So we tried kind of both ways. Like, there was a demo which was like very hard to beat. It was just so natural and charming. So when you get into the studio, there's a bit of a sterile environment there, and us musicians like to refer to this sort of as demoitis, where we're attached to a demo, possibly to a fault, where when we're recording it in the very technical and clean environment of a studio, the artist might feel that it's losing its original kind of message or vibe or whatever. So that was a concern, but yeah, once we recorded the vocals for that in that environment, and it was losing a lot. So I had asked Joe, well, what did you do exactly when you recorded the first idea? And he said, I recorded on this, very cheap like microphone, and I was just doing it like, in my room, whatever. And I was like, all right, well, why don't we try it, see how it goes? But instead of it being like the room, let's just do that in the booth. So we kind of repeated the same process, but in a new timeline. And that's what we ended up going with. So, for that song, we didn't use the nice microphone. We just used like this, marshmallow mic. Yeah. Like a headset. Because it sounded like the best.
Like a telemarketer.
So that's how the original was kind of recorded, but we did it again for the sake of the album. And the French horn and everything, and we recorded with a nicer microphone and such. But
so does that make Introduction to the Snow a lo-fi song?
If you want to call it that, I suppose so. Because I guess technically, if you were to compare the literal fidelity, the vocal recording, you could argue that yes, that one track has lower. I guess you can't resolve as many of the frequencies coming out of the voice as you could if you used a different microphone. So technically, sure.
Can lo-fi have non-lo-fi individual tracks on it, or does everything have to be lo-fi to qualify?
Yeah, so that's kind of why I said that. Like, obviously, it's probably a broad term, but
it's a lo-fi fusion.
Sure, you can say that.
It's genre straddling.
I think a lot of the record is lo-fi fusion in a way, right? I mean, I feel like I don't know, Bora, necessarily on what you guys are recording with, but in terms of a lot of the sort of speaker cabinets and things, we also used some beat up kind of,
Yeah, there were a lot of moments where we, I guess, had the choice to have fidelity and learned that it was not the right move. So we kind of opted for a lower fidelity recording, which I try to say it carefully because it's like, if you just think of it from the perspective of like, a scientific recording, then sure, this lo-fi recording has less like actual information in it than this other one. Like the the audio frequencies are fewer in this one than in this one, even though they're both representing the same sound or whatever. I'm sorry to talk like that, but You're
all good. It's just like the vibes are different for this song than.
Yeah, I like talking about technical stuff because this project, and I think Ross, would agree. He was a huge part of it, but like this was very fun to do from a technical standpoint. So there was a lot of work and, consideration in that. And this song, which I'm obviously talking about way too long, but it's a good example of that because, the tools that we were using were, in my opinion, a kind of instrument. And I thought it was important to use that for the vocals and the background vocals of the song.
All right, let's give it a listen. Introduction to the Snow by Miracle Musical. That was Introduction to the Snow by Miracle Musical. And we are joined by its producers, Bora Karaca and Ross Federman, on a Zoom interview right now. Thank you again for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no problem.
So we were talking a lot on that previous song about, the way you produced that album. How'd you guys, work with Joe Hawley, who was, from what I understand, the sort of spearhead for the project, with all the different cast members for the production of this album?
Yeah, I think so the three of us really all worked together to produce this. And I think with each of us having sort of a special niche role within that, Bora, as you mentioned, really being on the technical end, handling all the engineering of the audio. I kind of came from a place of mixing, but really more of the sort of like mix producing, where you're really trying to help define the tone and the sort of the feeling you get from any given part, and Joe really coming at it primarily from a writing and arranging place. And really Joe did the bulk of the writing, though there were plenty of occasions where Bora and I contributed to writing as well, and there were plenty of occasions where so many other cast members contributed to writing with their own parts. And I think somewhere between Bora and I on the more technical end, I think, is where we got into really like kind of organizing all of the like flying in tracks from various contributors, and sort of putting the whole thing into a bot, just like finally turning it into like a file that you could listen to.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
I think when I first heard it, like, Joe was very much into that idea of, I guess, the remote collaboration and like, essentially the hologram. But yeah, at the time, it was like, it didn't occur to me as much. And then the first one we did, I was like, oh, this is great. The person on the other end of the country is very clearly resonating with the music, and they can basically perform with us, even though they're just laying out a track and sending it over. So yeah, I think that people just didn't really know that, they didn't really question that the technology was there. And then they perform a solo piece that can fit in with the rest of the music, and it sounds amazing. So yeah, just communication on email and phone, and that was mixed with basically like some of the artists were actually in they're visiting Los Angeles for like a day or two, or maybe they were just flying in for a layover or something, and then Joe had said, oh, why don't you come by and lay something down? And then, so some of them were physically there with me, and we were able to record something while they were there. And in other cases, they would just record it at home in their apartment in New York or something, and then send it over.
And for those of you just tuning in, all of this happened in 2012. 2012.
That's important to know.
So this is definitely a pioneer in what we would all begin to do. Our next track is I'll Unto Thyself, sort of the first, like, I'm not sure, true is not the right word, but first, like, independent song of the album. And my first question is about the music video. What is going on with the characters, the, like, whale guy with the wings, and I'm very confused by it.
Give it time, and the truth will be clear very soon.
It's a bit of a marketing ploy. You have to watch the video at least 100 times before it makes sense to you. So I just encourage you to keep at it.
Yes.
All right. That's good advertising.
This was Sean Donnelly, right? Is that I want to credit this properly?
Yeah, I think so.
Like I said, everything is a giant blur.
Yeah, and there's also various different pieces that between all of the various people involved with the project had more. Like I didn't really have much of a direct role at all. I don't recall in that music video.
I'm asking the wrong questions.
No, yeah, it's by Sean Donnelly and Teddy O'Connor. But Sean Donnelly is an animator, he's a director and an animator, and the stuff he makes is really wonderful and has a lot of that, like, very sort of hand drawn or organic morphing kind of feel. And he was just a perfect person for kind of bringing some kind of vision to the song itself, which may not necessarily be, it could be like a parallel vision. It could be like an actual vision, but I think he was like a perfect guy for the song. And Joe has known him for a long time, and thought that he would be a great fit. And,
I'd say so. Definitely fits the what the heck is going on nature of the album.
Which is a great question to ask just all the time when going through life, and
to questions that you might actually be able to answer. This song seems to be sort of a love letter to the island of Hawaii, and of course the album title is Hawaii Part 2. What impact do the islands have on the music here and on your production process with each of these songs?
I personally have my own kind of feeling, but Ross, if you have your own comment that you want to start with, because I have my own kind of view on it, but that might just be me.
Yeah, it's a good question. So, and I think, Bora, correct me if I'm wrong, have you been to Hawaii?
I have, yeah.
Oh, you have. Oh, I'm the only one that hasn't been. Okay. Yeah. So I had to approach everything from a point of not having actually ever experienced Hawaii and sort of only knowing it through what are likely somewhat cliche and stereotypical representations of it. I'm sad to say, but I don't know. In some ways, I assume that perhaps the counterpoint is I know Joe is absolutely been to Hawaii, and his time there was a big inspiration on his songwriting and his music in general. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Are you sort of asking in terms of like I don't know, Bora? You were around for the slide guitar recording. I feel like that's one of the more Hawaiian sounding licks on this song in particular.
Sure.
But other than that, I don't know that from my point of view that necessarily Hawaii itself was that big of an influence on the production style.
Yeah, in my opinion, I think we all had different sort of resonances and reactions with and to it, which I think is what the hope is in a way, where for me, Hawaii is sort of a key or a doorway to some other kind of understanding, some other step or stage or, level or, mirror image, where part 2 is not necessarily like implying that there's a part 1, but rather it's like, the next or the other side of something. And this is just for me. And I mean, having been to Hawaii, yeah, I understand, like, you are just physically in a different space where, you know, they have, you know, observatories there, because at the very top of like one of the tallest islands is where the sky is like very thin, so astronomical observations are quite good there, and the oxygen level is very low. So it's like, you know, you can go there and sort of have a different, you know, point of view, where you're not necessarily like thinking about the island itself, but rather the rest of your life. And that's just my, you know, that's what resonated with me personally. And obviously, you know, the art is in the eye of the beholder, I guess. Pretty satisfying answer for for a simple question, huh?
I appreciate it.
Yeah, there might be a lot of those, unfortunately. You know,
that's totally fine. I'm glad to get them. And I feel like, you know, how's Hawaii influenced the production process to, you know, the oxygen's low and you think about the rest of your life also is equally as good as what the heck is going on. I mean, if your question is what is going on, I don't think you're ever going to get an answer, because I mean, I don't even know if I can answer, but like, I can definitely, you know, talk about what I went through when we were recording it and producing it and getting it together. That would be great to hear.
Which I think is important. Whoa. Is that a zipper or a puppy excited to see?
That's a zipper. I'm going to have to mute myself here in a second, guys. I'm just getting back to
this is important stuff. This is important stuff.
We got to know.
This is valuable information.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have muted before I had to wash my hands. So then touching the door, you know, the rigmarole. I'll be rejoining you shortly. Sorry.
Sure. This is the sort of high quality, natural conversation content that the people want.
Of course. That zipper sound effect. It really reminisces of the slide guitar.
Yes. What a segue into this next point. Go on.
I thought you were the slide guitar in the aisle is another recurring theme in the aisle. The one that exact zipper sound reminds me of is the like split second, I think it's a slide guitar in the middle of the Mind Electric, which we'll hear later on.
Okay.
You know, when there's the opera and then there's all the different like really quick sound effects.
That could mean so many things, unfortunately. But yeah, I did take some special interest in that one because there's so much going on. But being a mixing engineer,
I do know exactly which part you're talking about, by the way. There's like
Ross is going to save the day.
That's the one.
Say that again, Ross.
I don't actually know if that's the guitar or not. I do not even remember like what.
I just am trying to remember what sound you're talking about. Honestly,
you'll know it if you go back and listen for it.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll put it in. I'll put it in right now.
Okay.
The audience just heard it, even though we didn't. Excellent.
Okay. Well, that's all that matters.
So that's that side sound slide effect. Again, and the zipper reminds me of the slide guitar, which, as to the song we're about to hear, is a prominent part of "Out Unto Thyself."
Yes.
What was it like, you know, also connecting to the Hawaiian bit of this album with the production and the process of making the song from your end? How did the slide guitar affect the way you approached the music?
That is a good question. I don't really want to speak for just the raw musical like themes. Like I don't want to color that too much, even though my sort of opinion is that the album kind of acts as a cohesive piece and a lot of elements just sort of bubble up to the surface and help that glue. They're not like responsible for the glue, but they help it. And which is why I like the joy of working in so many piecemeal moments and fashions. It was so it was such a joy to do because of how well and easily it all glued together. So the themes of the album and, you know, the literal production of it brought these artists together and these ideas together in a beautiful way. So if I could just be as vague as humanly possible to answer your question. So, but that was one of the songs that actually had more kind of evolutions to it. So possibly more than some of the other ones. So it did exist as like an instrumental track before I had heard lyrics to it. So those songs I think were harder for me at least to approach from like a production standpoint, because you know, you get attached to a version of the song that you've heard and you don't want to add any cloud or mud to the raw feeling, which I think is like an artist's desire at the end of the day. But I think Ross's drums, you know, really glued the whole piece together. If I can speak for him while he's muted.
I'm back.
If I can just praise.
I do want to point out, I'm going to redeem myself here. This is one track where the demo, I mixed my own drumming with the original electric, just demo, like drum machine drums.
Ooh.
Like, you know, neither one on his own was really quite doing it for me. I don't know. There's something about the weird juxtaposition and they're very different sounds. If you go and listen listen very carefully for them, I think you'll hear it. But it's like it's in one of those ways where it sounds almost like a filtered delay. In cases that's somehow magically ahead of the other beat in other times. So it's not actually a delay. It's just like it's like a play along thing.
I actually know what you're talking about.
You got it? All right, cool. I'm not really making it up.
No, yeah.
There are times where you can notice because some of the parts I think the hi-hat pans differently. The real kit, the hi-hat's closer to one side and then the other kit. And so when there are these open hi-hats, you can kind of parse apart the different like drum kits in the mix.
Ross took some beautiful, bold directions that I must applaud on this program, if I may. That added a space, a new space. You know, I was going to say room, but that might be underselling it to this particular song. That I think would let the audience appreciate it as much as we did before we had it recorded.
Heck yeah. All right, let's take a listen. Pay attention to the drums on I'll Unto Thyself by Miracle Musical. We're joined with its producers, Bora Karaca. Am I pronouncing that right, by the way?
That's one of the many ways that you can pronounce it.
How do you pronounce it?
Karaca. So,
okay, sorry.
In Turkish, the C is like a J, so it's Karaca, but you know, you can say however you want. But yes, the C is like a hard J.
Okay, sorry about that. I should have asked before the interview starts. Bora Karaca and Ross Federman. Am I getting that one right?
Yeah. Lower bar, but yes. Thank you.
Lower degree of difficulty there.
I think Federman is the right.
Well, Federman comes up if you every now and then.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I get it. My name's Ryan Scibetta, but it looks like Scibetta. So a lot of times I use ciabatta bread. Right. And then of course our editor and engineer Quill Sang has it pretty easy. Just think of the words Quill and Sang, and there you go.
Easy.
So the next song we're going to hear is Black Rainbows. And this is where we really get into the color motifs of Hawaii Part 2. The refrain, how the, LA sort of refrain come in for this track with the Polynesian chanting?
I could be wrong about this, but I think the initial concept was to, I believe, state the colors in the lyrics somehow. But if it were me and and the rhythm just happened to literally be LA, then yeah, that'd be pretty great. So, but yeah, as far as the actual genesis of it, I wouldn't say that there was a discrete like game plan or like other than that was the sort of dimension that I don't want to say character that like performed the lines, but like that instrument. Like if you consider that like one instrument, the recitation of the colors, and that's as vague as I can possibly get without frustrating anybody. I don't know if Ross has any comment on that.
The color part vocal thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It almost was like, I don't even know.
Okay, so I will say that's an example of one of the songs that was like very much like it sort of hatched complete in a way.
I would actually disagree there a little bit.
Okay, we're gonna have very wildly differing opinions.
Parts of it did. I mean, that song it did come together quite quickly.
Well, right? Yeah. Now that you say you disagree, and I think about the actual like engineering on it, yeah, of course it wasn't done, but there was a lot of work involved. But in my opinion, like the music.
I remember building a beat off of a more or less a vocal like beatbox demo.
That's a good point.
Which in this case, the beatbox demo not in the final track anyway.
Okay, so this is a Ross conversation. I think I am just causing chaos. But maybe I don't know. I didn't hear that one.
The only thing I could think about the entire time working on that was how well just listing the colors out in a particular order made for such a nice rhythm.
Yeah, that's what I thought was the case.
I think it is.
So, that's why I thought it was, that's what I meant by it, like kind of having, it had like more of a structure when it came to the demo kind of phase. Maybe I'm wrong and I'm just remembering absolutely nothing, but that was my memory of it, where it's like, yeah, we did like quote unquote production on it, but it was like, it seemed like it had already matured before getting to the,
I think you're right. More so than some, I mean, I think the extreme examples were more like Dream Suite was like kind of a much more of a blank canvas, I feel.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of my like measuring stick for the album is Dream Suite, with the other ones. And I feel like Black Rainbows might be on the more of the opposite side of the spectrum, if I can use a little wordplay.
Excellent.
The production was important, but I think it was more adding on top of it, just in my opinion. What do I know? The extra vocals were sort of like adding this layer.
Do we remember Connected Rainbows, those lyrics?
Yeah. Maddie Diaz, yeah.
I originally thought those were the like original melody, and then you layered the vocal bass line underneath. Which, speaking of, I just Googled it, and when you're saying the specific order, it is red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple in that order. So exactly red, orange, the colors yellow, of the green, rainbow.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's
what I thought.
That makes sense, and I don't know that I ever. No, I think that.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't want to speak out of turn, but I thought that was the whole.
No, you're right. Concept. You're right. No, I think I knew that. It doesn't. Whatever. More impressive that they flow together so rhythmically and also colorfully. Then in that case.
Right. Which it's nice to think that was this sort of seed from which the kind of vocal beatbox and then everything else came. But I'm not actually. No,
I think you might be right. I mean, that's definitely a Joe question, but I mean, I guess that makes sense that it would be in that order. But the way he was able to just kind of create this pretty catchy rhythm out of it is pretty cool. It's a little reminiscent in a much better way. I'm going to throw out a crazy reference. If anybody listening has seen the movie A Mighty Wind, and the two main characters in the new Main Street Singers, the sort of new agey couple, are like in this color religion, and they're like green, purple, indigo, violet. Anyway, it always reminded me of that scene.
It's a great movie.
It's a wonderful movie. They all those films.
Well, it's a very mighty song, I must say. That's my segue.
That answers the question.
Yeah. This song also connects pretty well to the song we're going to hear afterwards, White Ball. In fact, now that I say it out loud, I think I might play those two back to back, and then I'll just talk about White Ball afterwards.
Sure.
With sort of, black rainbows, white ball, and the different romantic themes that go with both songs. Were these two written with each other in mind, or was it sort of like a coincidence in that they ended up next to each other?
I think it's more coincidental. Ross, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that White Ball came before Black Rainbows, right? Mild confidence. I'm totally wrong.
I don't recall. Honestly, I'm not.
I feel I vaguely remember, at the very least, hearing the idea of White Ball long before Black. And if I'm wrong, I'm so sorry. Time muddles the brain, and what can you do about it?
I think unfortunately, I'm with Bora in not necessarily remembering the full sort of chronological timeline. Wait, hold on one second.
Sure.
How dare you not know the exact order of things that happened 9 years ago?
Yes. It all sort of happened which I would like to turn into somewhat of a point, which is the titles might seem to have a clear message, but I never really looked at it that way, and I never thought of it that way. So if it's like Black Rainbows and White Ball, my mindset was always just sort of following the very kind of continuous flow of a story. And Joe had always talked about White Ball envisioning like a chessboard, or like a giant chessboard or something, which is literally either black and white or whatever, color you want to indicate, like a chessboard, let's say. But, at least trying to produce it and trying to get my head in there. I wasn't really thinking about that necessarily, but rather the communication between the characters and however vague that might be. But I would notice something obvious and then kind of try and follow a story that was happening underneath it.
Yeah. Black and White was a pretty consistent theme. It seems like you had an entire album sort of involving it with good and evil in 2011 as well.
Sure. Yeah.
Which, again, for those of you just tuning in, we're talking to the producers, Bora Karaca and Ross Federman from Miracle Musical, which is itself sort of a spin-off of a rock band called Tally Hall. A blue rock band called Tally Hall, my bad.
Oh, no bad at all. It's a very silly word, so you don't have to say it.
I like it. It's good. I know you guys have kind of disavowed it and just call yourself a band now, but I like it. I think it's fun.
Hey, that's fine. Oh, Ross Federman is connecting digitally, possibly?
Indeed. We have lost the phone number and now have Ross Federman's iPhone.
Oh my gosh, the excitement is growing. I'm just going to keep talking until he...
Indeed.
That might not be satisfying of an answer, as far as themes go, but Joe and I have had conversations about this where he would kind of tell me that he had an idea, but it might not necessarily have been completed yet. And then I would kind of create my own interpretation that, I wasn't creating some nonsensical story out of my head and putting my own ideas in the project, but I was kind of taking that. If you see something on the surface and then kind of build something underneath that, I think that was what, if I could be as vague as possible, yet again, to approach it from, some kind of artistic direction.
Yeah.
Guys, I have some really terrible news. I hate to just butt in and jump in.
Sure.
First of all, accidentally hung up on the call a second ago, disappeared. I am going to have to go
shortly.
Okay. I'll carry the weight of this whole project.
Will you be able to see this thing through to the finish line? I have to jump off. I didn't quite account for the length of time. So I guess I'm not inquiring on how long you would have needed.
I asked about it. I could speed it up. Before you go, do you have any final thoughts for the people listening?
Yeah, I guess I would just say it's, one thing that probably is just important to stress is how different this album probably even is to me and to Joe and to Bora and to every member that contributed. And I think, that's a big part of how it came out the way it did. It was always sort of something nebulous about it that you had to fill in the blanks on as a participant. And I think as a listener too, hopefully I'm not wrong on that, but that some of the feedback that I get is along those lines. And this was an honest sort of what happens when you try this and you just kind of create something and everybody just brings their own thing to it. And I think I've been happy with the results, and I've just been happy that other people seem to be finding it and enjoying it.
Well said.
All right. Definitely. Thank you so much for joining us, Ross.
Yeah.
Thank you for all the music you made.
Bora, thanks for talking to. Feel free to text if you have any burning questions, and I'll
probably have tons. And Ryan's gonna be frustrated.
Sorry. Let me slow you guys down there. Okay, thanks so much.
Have a good day.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
I would like to quickly tag on to that, which the majority of we get so many new listeners, and they're so wonderful, and they'll usually send us messages that are less questions and more just reflections of it on how they experienced it. And you cannot ask for anything more as you put something out there. It just sort of grows the scope of the project in such a profound way, in that all these people are having these new experiences, new interpretations, and a lot of times they just say how positively it affected them. And if I were to listen and read just the cold hard lyrics right now, I might be like, oh, maybe I changed my mind on this one after this many years or something, which I guess you could say about any art or music, but that's kind of how it has been. And it warms our hearts to hear people reacting in a positive way.
You made a big impact on all of us, so thank you.
No, thank you.
Thanks again for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So while that song was playing, or while we had the recording paused, everything's nebulous.
Yes.
We were talking about the, why you might be being sort of vague on your answers and the mystery behind this album.
Yeah.
What is special about Hawaii Part 2 with people finding it just on their feeds and Spotify without knowing anything about it?
Right. I'm sorry if you are looking for some cold hard truth, and meaning, which I personally probably could not provide. And I don't think anyone of us could, but, when releasing it initially, the downside, I guess, was that people might not have found it. And the people who did may have found it sort of by pure chance or just random kind of connection or searching. And because they found it in such a, happenstance way, it may have affected them in a more significant way, which, is so great, because that's kind of the message that we receive from people, is that they were that is how they react. They don't necessarily ask for, meaning or anything. They just explain how much it impacted them. And in a perfect world, the music could just exist and would be heard somehow, just miraculously. But at the time, unfortunately, it wasn't necessarily an easy way to get the message out. But that's kind of what the project is. It's a distant, cluster of stars and dust that is not necessarily noticed until somebody just happens to point a telescope in that particular direction. We're going to be hearing lots of astronomy metaphors today.
Are you interested in astronomy?
I am an amateur astronomer, so I do enjoy it. But I think my brain did go there a lot when working on this album, because a lot of the conversations would start with, I don't know if otherworldly is a way to describe it or do it justice, but like, you know, basically flipping the coin of whatever, you know, initial thought you're having and, you know, climbing the ladder to the next level or whatever way you want to look at it. And a lot of it was like, you know, the night to the normal day. And like, I always thought of like, you know, in Contact when, you know, there's a scene where the beach is perfectly well lit, but the sky is actually dark and starry. That was kind of the unusual concept that was kind of going through my head. And when you're looking through a telescope, you can see much better than you're kind of able to with the naked eye. So
yeah,
that's just my personal little.
No, it makes sense. I have a really vivid memory of being in South Dakota with family, going to a summer camp, and they took us out to a mountaintop. We got to look through a telescope at like Jupiter and Saturn. And it was so amazing to be able to see those planets.
It's beautiful.
I don't know if it was Jupiter and Saturn, actually. It might have just... No, it was probably them, because it was a pretty powerful telescope.
Yeah, those are popular sites, and they're pretty easy to see most of the year. I'm happy you got to see that. I really am.
It was amazing. And then it was also very nice because somehow they coordinated all the kids to keep their phones off, so there wasn't the extra light.
Now that is an achievement.
Yes. So speaking of achievements, the next song is, I think, by far the most technically advanced, technically demanding. The Mind Electric, where slightly less than half the song is just played in reverse.
Okay, yes.
And yet it still sounds like music.
Yeah.
I think when I was showing this album to somebody, you know, like, you gotta listen to this. This is so good. And they're like, Ryan, this sounds like the kind of music that people get brainwashed to.
I'm sorry. Yeah. It's more of a, you know, I don't know if you want to hear it first, but yeah, it's not exactly something that you play and expect somebody who hasn't heard the album to jump right in, but it rewards repeat listenings. Absolutely.
Right. Maybe we should play this one and then talk about it.
Sure.
So everybody, I highly recommend you stick around. Here is The Mind Electric by Miracle Musical. And no, your speakers work perfectly fine. So Mr. Karaca, what was that?
It was just a beautiful piece of music, and I hope you enjoyed it. Well, okay, you're talking about the reverse thing, which is, you know, I would say empirically not a common way to hear music. But in my opinion, it exists as kind of like a standalone, you know, framed piece in which, you know, in this case, it's framed by the element of time. And in that way, much like a framed painting, you can stop and deliberate on it and take the time to focus on the pieces that are inside of it. But at the same time, while in reverse, it does actually sound like a unique piece of music, which is surprising when you reverse a song. A lot of times it doesn't sound like, it just sounds strange because we're not used to that. But it does definitively reward repeated and different listenings.
Yeah. I remember the YouTube version being a different, like, it's the song reversed compared to the Spotify version.
Yes.
Which version ended up on the vinyl, by the way?
Well, technically both.
Okay, you got me there.
Yeah. So, I mean, not a lot of people actually listen to it reversed, but some people do. And some people enjoy it. But yeah, if you listen to it as it is, then yeah, you will technically be listening to a song in reverse and then kind of forward. But, you know, as a piece, it is one song. So yeah, not everybody is going to listen to it the same way, because we're used to a certain kind of, you know, rhythm and beat when it is mostly of the reverse nature, where it starts off as like a decayed tail and ends with a sharp point. It's not what we're typically used to, but it does actually stand on its own in a very cool way that it reminds me of like as simply enough as it is a framed piece of art, which you may have noticed the artwork without being led to it, but it's a way to notice something else, the other side of it.
Yeah. And
I can talk about like technical stuff because it's one of my favorite songs that I worked on.
Go for it.
Because
talk about whatever you want to.
As a mixing engineer, I really want everybody to hear literally everything, which isn't necessarily the right move. Like, I think in mixing, you want to make things clear, well balanced, and, you know, forward enough for the listener to find it pleasant and for them to hear things.
Don't you mean reverse enough for the listener to find it pleasant?
In a way, yes. So this song was challenging simply for the fact that there were so many elements in it, but I couldn't rest knowing that one of the pieces might not be heard at the end of the day. So just from a mixing standpoint, I wanted all the little vocal parts, which when you have different melodies and harmonies and different words, technically it's all kind of audible. And that technique has been around for a long time, but you know, hopefully people can hear all the elements, which means I did an okay job. So the final production may have been born from a desire for everyone to hear literally everything. So it was a fun one to work on.
Interesting. So did you like stagger the audio or put them on different frequencies, or how'd you make that happen?
In some ways, yeah. So when you say stagger, you can literally stagger the timing, which a lot of people do very subtly, where you can't notice it, but your ear is able to kind of better parse the information that it's receiving. But I used a lot of panning techniques and EQing, which, you know, as you said, is a frequency sort of technique. And I tried to carve out as many tiny little pathways so that everything could be heard. And I think the end result is pretty audible.
I like
Hopefully. Yeah, I usually I might get people asking me about other songs, like, is there a thing here? But I don't think anyone has ever asked me about Mind Electric. So I think that might be a symptom of it being a decent mix. So we'll see.
I would think that it would be the song you got asked the most about, just because it's the song that has the most going on at once.
Right. So I do get questions sometimes from a technical standpoint of like, there's like a noise here. Is this? And then I'll say, actually, yeah, it is. You know, it's there. But I was just like kind of mixing generally. I wasn't trying to like make one particular part stand out. But Mind Electric, I was kind of trying to make everything stand out, which it is, I believe, kind of the nature of the song, where it's very it is kind of cacophonous, but in a way that doesn't confuse.
Call me if you look at it right.
I think people can actually hear everything that's going on, which is odd. An odd thing to say, but you know, I like that one.
Yeah, I like it too. Speaking of mixing, I remember reading through the Ask Me Anything, and I don't know which of you three it was, you or Ross or Joe, but it was Ask Me About the Piano Bridge during Murders, which is...
It was probably me, because I need people to notice everything I do. So I'm just craving attention.
Let me ask you, the next song we hear, actually the song before Mind Electric, but I just had a brain fart and messed up the order.
Which is totally fine. I mean, nowadays.
Yeah, you know, we're playing with time, you know?
Play it how you wish.
I'm putting these two songs in reverse. But I'll ask you, the next song we're going to hear, Murders, what is going on with the tone of the piano bridge?
Oh, I'd love to talk about it. Should we listen or should we discuss?
I'm going to play the piano bridge tone right here with the magic of editing.
Okay.
And then we'll discuss it, and then we'll play
because people can listen to the song, and then, I don't know where you're going to place it, but, people can listen to the song and then fondly recall it.
Yeah, exactly. And that was it. That's the piano bridge tone. So how did you accomplish that?
Okay, now I feel slightly put on the spot, but
you are put on the spot.
Yeah, okay. So I will preface this by saying that the whole project was a treasure, a delight to work on, and I wanted to put as many kind of performances as I could from just a mixing standpoint. But that one was. Okay, so on my piano, I kept the sustain pedal down. I kept it depressed, and then I played that part through a speaker pointed at the piano, and then I recorded that. So I recorded the resonances of the piano strings as heard through that part of the song. So it's like an interesting piano feedback.
You recorded the speaker?
Yeah, but so the speaker was playing the music. Okay. And causing the piano strings to resonate. Oh. And then I recorded the piano strings.
Just by having the speaker far enough away and the mic so close to the piano string.
Yeah, so the piano strings acted as the room, if you will. The reflections in a large room, but instead of an actual room, it was the things that were resonating, vibrating were the piano strings.
That's fascinating.
So it kind of sounds like underwater, kind of in an interesting sort of metallic, resonant way. So that's my little story.
I like it. I read the Ask Me Anything, and I read your response to it, but I didn't understand it until right now.
Well, I do love clarifying very silly technical things.
Well, I got a question for the ending of the song. It seems like the piano tone changes there with the all for nothing at all, that bit. Uh-huh. And the reverb effects we hear on Joe Hawley's voice throughout this song and throughout the whole album.
Yeah.
How are those accomplished?
I believe that was more of a performance thing. That song was very, I would say, except for the bridge, was a very, at the end of the day, kind of like a straightforward mixing wise. It took a long time to arrive at where we got because of how kind of deceptively simple it was. And you would think, oh, the arrangement is not that complicated, so the mix shouldn't be that complicated. But it did not quite turn out that way. We very much labored over the sound because when you hear it in person, especially when it's just performed in a room, it is a very strong effect, but plainly recording it wasn't quite giving us the same reaction. So we ultimately went for a bit of a distorted tone overall. And it gave a new color, but was able to sort of resonate in the same way as hearing it more organically. So it does sound different than if you were to literally hear it somewhere, but I think we managed to make it in the same way.
So similar to how you used the different microphone back in Introduction to the Snow.
Very much so, yeah. So that kind of technique in recording is kind of audible throughout the album here and there. And I think Murders is one of the times where it's sort of persistent.
Definitely. That's really interesting.
It's a good track. I like it.
Yeah.
I kind of see it as like a throughway, like a passage. But with like a lot of construction, and I'm glad that it turned out the way it did. So, but the bridge, it felt like it needed to be more of a moment of levity. So it's not quite the same tone, and it sort of kind of flows back into how it sounded, but with a little bit of a different performance, different kind of style. And that's probably why it sounds like, different near the end. But it's not all like what I had described. It's just that one part.
Well, I guess we should take a listen to the entire song now.
Good idea.
Thank you again for joining us.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
So I remember earlier on we were talking about, Black Rainbow and White Ball and how those songs, I thought they were connected, but they weren't really. They were just coincidence. They ended up third and fourth on the album.
This is purely my kind of view. I see them all as connected.
Oh, yes.
And that's just my personal view, because the whole production of it seemed very connected to me. There were sort of tenuous moments. There were short little blips. There were longer themes, both musical and technical. So, and of course it it happened in 2011ish, 2012. So it's all kind of like it's all cloudy to me anyway. But and I remember it as one event,
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people listen to it and they have a much different experience than I do, which I think is wonderful. And I love hearing people's stories when they first hear it.
Your version might be cloudy, but since it's different to everybody, it's a variation on the cloud.
Tell me about it. I don't know. Yeah, that might not be a satisfying answer, but
no, it makes sense. It makes sense, and I do think they're all connected.
Yeah.
The segue I was trying to make.
Sure.
No, it sounded so salty. I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
Or I should say, the way that my cloud variation is I kind of see each pair of songs as going together strong, in an even stronger bond in the overall album.
Yeah.
Where Introduction to the Snow and Island to Thyself are the introduction songs. Black Rainbows and White Ball are the romantic songs. Murders and The Mind Electric are the spooky songs.
I think they're all spooky songs.
That's fair. Stranded Boulevard, I don't know, that one's spooky too. Labyrinth isn't that spooky. Okay.
Yeah, I like spooky. I don't even know if that's a bad thing or, I think everybody has their own sort of definition, but I like spooky. That's a fun, it's just a fun word.
Yes.
Because it's kind of a silly word to begin with. It's not really a negative word, but that might just be me.
I recommend whenever you get the chance, look up Big Daddy Liz from The Worst Witch.
Okay.
It's like this direct to video, like 1980s movie. That's like a Hogwarts ripoff.
Oh. But
in the mid, there's this witch, right? Who goes to a Hogwarts school, but she's not good at being a witch. Hence, she's the worst witch. But she saves the day anyway.
What a family tale.
Oh yes, but in the middle of it, Tim Curry shows up as a character who's literally named Big Daddy Wiz, who is the headmaster of the school. He shows up, sings a song about how spooky Halloween is with as much flair as he can possibly muster, and then disappears into the night, never to be seen again.
What a great actor.
Agreed. So whenever I hear spooky, that's always what pops into my head.
That's a great image.
And that song, the song, Spooky Scary Halloween by Tim Curry, that song is a bop. And the two songs we're going to hear, I think of as the bop couple. Bop
sure.
people. Labyrinth and Time Machine have some of the catchiest riffs I've ever heard. Let's start with Labyrinth. This is the only rap song on the album. What was that like and it's got more, other than probably White Ball, though I'm not sure if Zubin counts as a guest singer. This one has,
yes, you could argue that we're all guests on it, which is kind of how I felt. Like, I didn't really feel like there was one kind of person at the front. other than Joe, but the people involved in performing on it. Like, it was kind of like an ensemble type of thing. And
it's a cast,
which I'm happy with the term musical. But you were saying,
no, I'm the interviewer. You're the interviewer. Sure. As much talking as possible.
Yeah. Well, you said only rap song, and I was like, well, you could argue all kinds of points. But yeah, Shane Moe, great artist, an actual absolute treasure.
I hear his rap. I'm like, that sounds really good, but it doesn't seem that hard to do. And then I try it and I'm like, oh, right.
Sure.
This is incredibly talented. I think I freaked out a couple people just walking along the UC Santa Barbara, like beach side, just rapping it to myself.
Well, I hope not. I mean, people listen to music and sing along all the time.
Yeah. But how did the sort of chip tune, what's the word I'm looking for? Refrain? The like 16th note lightning.
Riff works. I like riff.
How did that come about?
Well, I think the thing that, Joe and I grew up on is Nintendo music. And I might personally say that is my what made me as a musician, possibly a little bit in a cheeky way, but also truthfully. And I can go on and on about that. But, he was influenced by the NES jams, as I was. And but yeah, that's the short answer, I think. I think the idea to include something like that in music had been kind of there for a while, but I think his first opportunity to sort of present that was this particular song. So it wasn't exactly a new concept. It just, this just happened to be the first one to put it in.
Interesting.
And I personally, and I do talk about this, but in older sort of, digital music, you had 3 monophonic channels on the original Nintendo and like a noise channel. So the kind of music you could have reproduced on those carts was relatively limited, but through that limitation, the composers created beautiful and memorable tracks, which might be so memorable because of the limitation that they were given.
Yeah.
The Mario Brothers theme is so recognizable, and it's like the limitation was very tight to create that. And I think as a result, something wonderful and memorable blossomed forth. So that's my long explanation to that question.
I like it. Follow-up question though. What was the noise channel?
So it would be a dedicated sort of synthesis track that would create like some form of like pink noise, but like it would shape it in a way that it would sound more like a hi-hat or like a snare drum or something. But it would be more dedicated to making like percussive noises that were derived from like just pure noise. And of course, I'm very much generalizing, and I'm sure there's somebody who can explain it better. But you wouldn't hear a Nintendo cartridge play any more than 3 concurrent monophonic tones. Is my point.
That makes sense. And that channel is just for like kicks and snares, and it can't play more than one at once. Yeah,
exactly. So they found creative ways to make it sound like it was, but it really wasn't.
Interesting.
It's really great. Yeah, so that's kind of what we grew up on.
back in the olden days.
Yep.
Before my my youngster.
The old time. Before times.
I had my Wii's and my Wii U's and my Wii U me's and our Wii U's.
That just all great times, great systems.
Definitely. Well, speaking of going back in time, that also works for the song where you hear directly after Labyrinth, Time Machine.
Yes.
Sort of has, story elements with the Simon character that we've heard in the past 3 tracks. It's assuming that those tracks are the same person for all of them. But it seems like, this is a track where I wish it existed, even if it has a less than stellar, reliability rating. The Time Machine.
Reliability.
Yeah, well, I hear all those sounds of things sort of crashing down near the end point of the song.
Okay.
And that was my interpretation of it. Again, everybody's got a different interpretation.
I like that.
I thought that the time machine crashed and it was he was stranded beyond time, hence the stranded lullaby that follows it.
I mean, how could I argue with that?
No, you're the guest. You're the talking.
No, I like hearing this stuff. It was great. Well, yeah, I mean, that song existed before, and outside of many of these other songs. So, but yeah, the production is very different from its original sort of song. So that is the sort of stuff I can talk about because
let's hear it. What was the original version of Time Machine?
Well, it was written by Rob Cantor, and I'd have to ask him when he wrote it, but yeah, I'm not actually sure.
It wasn't originally for Hawaii Part 2?
In its original form, no. It sort of took on this new life in this album.
Was it like an acoustic track originally, or did it just get reshaped?
Yeah, it was definitely reshaped. I don't know if acoustic is the right term, but it was, it wasn't, it was performed more of like a live band in the Tally Hall days.
Interesting.
In the long ago.
In the mid aughts.
Yes, I think if time is not making an absolute fool of me, but yeah.
I ought to have been there. The fact that I was 5 years old is no excuse.
Hey, we all can't all have been born at the beginning of time.
Yes, and I gotta ask the question: is there anything on the horizon for Tally Hall?
Oh, I honestly have no idea. I mean, I think we're all I'm personally working on my own thing, and I think everybody else kind of is.
Well, if you want to promote your own thing, it naturally occurred in our natural conversation. And
true, yeah, I'm working on it, so I will have to get back to you on that.
All right,
when it's actually ready to be released. But yeah,
well, I'll do any promotion you want me to. This has been fantastic.
You're so kind.
And thank you for giving so much of your own time for this interview.
I know there's not a lot of answers to like, what does this mean? But I can answer a lot of other questions.
And I want to hear those answers. It's fascinating stuff. I think these sound like wrap-up questions. We still have 4 songs to go. Oh, yes. Are there any last thoughts about Labyrinth that the listener should be thinking about when they go to hear the song?
Good question. Focus all of your mental energy on Shane Mo and Charlene K. And, just give your ears and all of their energy to those 2 people. And they're absolute treasures. And I love hearing them.
Me too. I'm joined again by Bora Karaca, one of the producers and sort of like the mastermind behind the technical elements of this album, Hawaii Part 2.
Wow. I must gracefully accept.
You are the mind of the masters, Mr. Karaca. And speaking of the sort of technical process you did, we were briefly talking about our next song, Time Machine, and how it originally had a different form as a Tally Hall song.
Yeah.
What were the steps that you took to bring the song from its original live band form to the form that we are going to hear on this album?
Good question. So Joe had a drum kind of concept that I think carried the general idea into its current version. Very fast-paced, upbeat kind of feel. And just like the kind of repetitive synth kind of came through. And I had an idea of like, a guitar solo, but that was like kind of like an impossible guitar solo, but it's not quite impossible, but it sounds kind of like it wasn't performed quite by a human.
Just to give that electronic vibe.
Yeah. Pretty simple answer to a much more complicated process, but yeah, that's part of it, I guess.
Speaking of that, simple answers to complicated processes, how do you abstract the process of, the engineering and the mastering and all the technical elements you do when you're trying to think about what you want to do before getting into the nitty gritty?
I think a lot of that occurs with the very common kind of, I don't know if artistic process is pretentious enough for you, but there's a discussion on like the why. Why is this the way it is? What is the concept? What is the feeling behind it all? And you talk so much about that by the time you step into the what, it's kind of already been discussed and placed in your mind that as you're working on it, technically, you're not actually stopping and asking those questions anymore because it's kind of established. You've talked about it at length, and we kind of had been talking about it at length for a very long time, such that when the actual work begun, we didn't have to stop and ask the more vague questions or the more kind of artistic questions. It was more just, how do we physically and literally get this to tape, so to speak? So it's kind of like a segmented, simple process of, talk about why, then talk about and do what, and then put it out, basically.
I was lied to in elementary school. It's not who, what, when, where, why. It's
sure,
yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that might be a little bit too simplistic of a answer, but I think when you talk at such length about something, there comes a point where you're very much ready to apply the technical craft and just start and finish the work without having to take a sort of theoretical pit stop, I guess. At least for this project. I mean, I could be wrong.
That makes sense. And what was the why that you were thinking about as you went into the nitty gritty?
That is also a good question, because I don't know if there's a solid answer. Because, as I said, a lot of my experience was just sort of my experience. And
so what was your experience?
I was kind of told about the project, and I saw like the image of Hawaii as just a kind of like just a doorway, and not really thinking about the actual island necessarily. Like, I've thought about the island, I've been there, but I was thinking more about like what if there was some other side of this concept, the other side of your mind, and going from there and kind of creating the story in your mind that way. Like the sort of like stage setup of, that other world in Twin Peaks, or, what was it called in the hit Netflix show, Stranger Things? What do they call the other side? The Upside Down. Thank you.
There we go.
Like, just these sort of the dark world in Legend of Zelda: Link to the Past. Like, analogs of your current world, but seen from a point of view that you don't think of because you are used to a certain pattern or a certain routine. And that was as vague as I kind of had the very initial general frame. And then I kind of worked from there personally. And that's I guess as simple as I can put it.
Well, I appreciate it. And it makes sense that it would be complicated because, art is complicated.
It really is, But yeah, I mean, our only job is to kind of help the, audience come to some kind of conclusion on their own and not actually, try and explain anything. At least for me. I mean, that's just my view.
Yeah. That, again, everybody's got their own variation on this album. And I think it's pretty clear at this point that it is supposed to be up to interpretation.
Too true.
I had my whole, guy by guy feels like he lost his past, sees an ad for a time machine, buys it. Uh-oh. But that doesn't need to be everybody's interpretation. It doesn't even seem like it was the creators. So
yeah, I would much rather hear everyone else's version and hear how they were impacted by it.
I wish I knew what other people thought for this one.
I'm sure more interpretations will come out.
Yeah. If you're, you know what? This is a great opportunity to plug the phone number for KCSB. So if you're listening and you hear this song and you have an interpretation, send a voicemail to 805-253-3091 and say it's for In The Spotlight. And we will respond to it on our next audio recording. That's 805-253-3091. Say it's for In The Spotlight for Ryan Scibetta. And if you have any messages to Miracle Musical or Bora Karaca, feel free to send those over and I'll forward it to them. There we go. Audience participation. I guess we should play the song Time Machine that you worked on. Any of the nitty gritties that the listener should listen to?
Listen only to the guitar. That's all I say. No. That's my performative contribution, among other things. But no, I'm just kidding. It's vocals, the vocoders, the synth, the drum beat. Just soak it all in.
Thank you once again. I've said that so much, but I cannot say it enough.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We're coming up on the last couple tracks. The penultimate one on this album, Stranded Lullaby, sort of the calm before the storm that is Dream Suite in C major. This track is really pleasant to listen to. It's got, and all the sounds sort of blend together really well. And as someone who worked on the techno elements, I'm curious how did you accomplish that sort of like mixing and convergence?
For the last two songs in particular, or just
I'd say for Stranded Lullaby.
Ooh, that is a good example of letting the performance kind of take the reins in a way. Stranded was probably the least it had the least questions attached from a technical standpoint, which made me very happy. It was, I think, literally the first song we recorded because it was so fresh and ready to go that it was just like the first on the agenda. And it was like technically relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
I forgot I played bass on it. Okay. I'm trying to like remember everything. But yeah, I think, that it appears kind of later on in the album, and the album kind of is pretty easy to listen to, like start to finish, like as far as the flow is concerned. So
definitely
not everybody listens to it from start to finish, but that song was the first, if not one of the first to be recorded simply. And the fact that it occurs kind of later, there's in my mind, just as I'm listening to it, because I was there, it has a nice sort of circular feature to it that reminds me of, the whole thing and the kind of imagery and the glue that is the album. And I use that word a lot when I'm talking about this album, for both the performers and the kind of the nature of the project itself. So
that Stranded Lullaby was the glue, or that
in a way, yeah, because it's not the last song, it's the penultimate one, but it was the first or one of the first songs to record. And when I hear it like so late in the album, but then I remember it was like kind of the beginning of it, it's nice to hear it at the end because it is sort of the beginning in a way, just from the pure technical standpoint and the sort of timeline of the production. That's my personal little anecdote about that one. So I wouldn't draw from that the actual meaning of the song. I just like telling that story.
So it's a nice story to hear.
And just a quick side, I might need to wrap up the two songs into one comment.
I got you. We'll play both at the same time then. Or actually, sure. Let's play Stranded Lullaby right now, and let's appreciate that calm before the storm. Here comes the storm. Dream Suite in C major. The first song I ever heard on this album, the most impactful song I ever heard on this album, a song that, this might be TMI, it made me cry for an hour. And I'm so glad it did.
TLI, if you ask me. No, that's very wonderful.
Yeah,
that's very kind of you.
There's so much to say and so little time to say it. This is the longest song, and yet it seems the most jam packed with things to
which do. Is a good thing in some ways, because you want music to have a lasting sort of impact in several moments in your life, and it's good to talk about it several times over the course of time.
Yeah, I know you're short on time for this interview. I have held you for 2 hours, and I appreciate that. Or 3 hours if you count the setup time. But I just want to know, how did you combine all of the such discrete elements of this song into something that flows together as one cohesive unit?
You could ask that about a lot of the album. And
I was about to ask how do you connect all the songs into one cohesive
answer
unit?
Is usually, but I think about it a lot. And the reason why I like talking about sort of the people involved across the country is because it kind of came together despite how piecemeal it was. And that just made me happy. Old friends, just people who I never got to have a face-to-face with managed to sort of collaborate on the project, and in a way that kind of resonates with the different songs themselves and the album as a whole. And of course, the mixing, but also the mastering of Roman Vale. And, there's several stages to kind of create cohesion, and everybody happened to be on the same page, and we were lucky to experience that.
Definitely. I have a question for the very last kick drum. I always expect right at the end. There's 4 kicks and 3 snares, and I'm always expecting an 8th snare, but it just cuts out, and I feel like that was an intentional decision.
Okay. I'm going to say that the very end.
The very end.
The absolute end. Yes. One day, perhaps soon, you will change your mind. I promise you.
For it's supposed to. Well, I don't think it's bad that it cuts out. I'm not trash talking that video.
No. I know you're not. I don't think that any sort of evenness would actually help that moment. I thought that was the right call.
Yeah, so because, thematically it's uneven, or?
That's also a good question. Just, pure aesthetics. I wasn't longing for another hit. But I felt that was right. But, who am I to say, really?
Yeah, you're only the person who engineered the mastermind behind the technical elements.
If you listen to the tail of it, the actual tail, that I like that part as the filling in. So you could consider that a piece of the missing pie.
The last 5 dissonant da, 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 as the water rushes in.
Yeah, the tail, the reverb tail of that, and yes, the water at the end that lays us out can be seen as a piece of the puzzle. So
leaving me with a lot of mysteries here.
And what else can you do in this life but just ask questions?
Miracle mystery, miracle musical.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get any other. I have so many other questions to ask, but they're all going to be like, well, that's the point.
Well, yeah, to be honest, sometimes when you have a question and you ask it out loud, you will kind of answer it by doing that. And I do that all the time. And oh yes, I just had to say it out loud. And that is my personal feeling. And I think everybody on the project has a slightly different view.
Yeah. What's the light that's brighter than the sun, Bora? What's invisible to some?
Oh, that's a very good question. I don't know if I can answer that.
All right, one last question. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the people listening?
Absolutely. I thank you all very, very much for listening. And just over the years, more and more people have been listening and kind of telling their personal reaction and their the impact that it's had. And it's very, very touching. And it makes us all very, very happy and excited that this long after initially releasing it, that so many people have experienced it and have had a positive reaction to it. And I love you all and thank you very much from the bottom of my heart.
Thank you. There's a saying, never meet your heroes. That saying is wrong. I just met my heroes and it feels great.
Well, you're too kind. You're too kind.
Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us and giving us this interview.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having us.